Chapter 3. For centuries, my people of the King Shield tribe served the royal family of Error as their hand in times of stress and turmoil. We staved off the worst creatures and hordes for Error at its borders, and we were given a home and respite in return. Our birthright of strength and martial prowess, and our culture of primal understanding kept us from mingling among the Errorites fully, but we were respected and beloved. Verse 3 of the Confessional Monolith. Find the hidden secrets of your mind that shall set you free. That order, pulsing inside Weapon over and over ever since he began to think, was starting to get more than a little annoying. It sounded like the whimper of a dog, sort of. Well, a dog's whimper was the closest thing Weapon knew of that he could compare that voice to. He was sure that something would be found on the next mission that would serve as a better comparison. For now, he was stuck here in nowhere. It's not that he couldn't move, just that there was nothing to move. His body wasn't here. He could think, but there wasn't anything to sense around him at all. The nothing gnawed at Weapon. He desired something like what was in his mind, what he could think of. For what he could think of, he could also remember. Only 2 instances, sure, but they were both exciting compared to this emptiness. And so, Weapon remembered. Weapon was awake. He knew how to kill, how to move his form in such a way as to stop the movement and pulsation of others. He knew how to talk, to confirm orders given to him, and how to jab at those order givers with words. Most importantly, he knew how to observe, to witness the world around him in such a way that no creature could hide from his vision. Deep within, he knew why he observed. To find the hidden secrets of his mind that shall set him free. Freedom meant mastery over everyone, even those who gave orders. That sounded good. Weapon didn't know why that sounded good, but he wanted it more than anything. This all came to Weapon in an instant, and he began observing. He was in an enclosed space, much larger than him, with very little light. The only fragment for any other creature's sight was sickly white, pale and flitting in a crystal near the highest part of a dome. A figure stood under the crystal, looking at Weapon with a completely covered face. It was certainly an ugly face, and though Weapon couldn't see it, Weapon observed the face smiling at him.
You are ready, Weapon. Go to sleep.
The order was deep, and the sound rumbled into the ground. The order's words came from the face, and it sounded very different from the order emanating from inside Weapon. Weapon felt his observation begin to falter. Good, then I won't have to see that embarrassing attempt of a mustache anymore. How curious. Those words were highly pitched and bouncy. They came from Weapon. Satisfaction flowed through Weapon, and he slept. That memory was the first, and it was good. The second was much more fun. Weapon was very happy to remember that one again. Awaken, Jin. Serve your master Surnir. This memory started differently. Instead of immediately observing, the nowhere began to disappear, and the world slowly grew back into existence around Weapon. The voice who had just given the order was a new one. How many voices would Weapon hear? How many were there in all the world? Weapon smiled in excitement for all of the new discoveries he had yet to find. However, this new voice, the voice of Master Surnir, was another one that now held mastery over Weapon. Weapon didn't like that, but there was nothing that could change it right now. Find the hidden secrets of your mind that shall set you free. The first voice, the calm voice, it kept speaking to him, and now Weapon knew exactly what it meant. Weapon would become free, and he would have mastery over Master Surnir too. This all came to Weapon in an instant, and when the world had fully formed, he observed it. It was a smaller place than the last one, and all a dead gray. It had stopped living only a few years ago. It was completely empty, except for a circular doorway to tunnels of darkness, and 3 figures dressed in colorful and bulky clothing made of steel. The 2 standing to the left and right held lit torches, and they were afraid. Weapon didn't need to observe that. He could see it in the trembling of their body, and smell it in the glisten of their sweat. But Master Surnir wasn't afraid. Weapon observed his anticipation to fight if Weapon attacked him, ridiculous as that was, but there was no fear in his eyes and in his pulse. For the first time Weapon could remember, admiration flowed through his mind. As the echo of Master Cernier's order began to fade from the room, Weapon bowed his head slightly, keeping his gaze on the man without fear. "No good morning, sir. It's rude to start off our relationship with such a stuffy greeting, you know. But yes, I will do as you command." Once again, the high-pitched and bouncy voice flowed from Weapon's mouth. It spoke with a clearer tone than Weapon could imagine, but it seemed to understand Weapon's thoughts. This voice was another friendly one, and Weapon smiled to know it so well. Master Cernier's tension began to relax, and he stood a little taller, his sense of superiority pulsing from dark eyes.
"You will get your good morning once you have proven your worth is greater than what you cost me."
His voice held power, not just the sort that bound Weapon, but also that which commanded ordinary men.
"Follow me, Jin. You are to kill many of my foes today."
Weapon felt a jolt of elation run through his form. One of his purposes would be fulfilled before he returned to the Nowhere. And that word Master Cernier used, Jin, was that the sort of being Weapon was? It didn't sound right somehow, as if it were a voice whispering something he couldn't hear in a language that Weapon couldn't understand. However, that barely mattered to him right now. Every new sensation and every new fragment of knowledge felt good to him. He would find the hidden secrets of his mind that shall set him free. "That sounds lovely, sir. Show me the way, and I will destroy all of those wretches who are trying to keep you on a diet. But they may have a point. I don't know if that armor of yours can hold much more man in it." Master Cernier glared at Weapon for a moment. Then he turned and walked into the darkness beyond the room with a chuckle, his guards hurrying ahead of him.
"Very amusing, Jin. If it weren't for that nasty curse on your soul, you could serve as a middling jester."
Weapon remained silent as he followed Master Cernier, his newly formed legs pittering in a rapid rhythm. A curse was upon him? How interesting. He couldn't speculate much about such a scarce yet striking tidbit of information like that before the dead tunnel came to an end, and a steep pathway under a circular series of steps rose before them to a world of brightness. The building itself that stood above the tunnel was also quite dead, but much of the interior was made up of stonework and wooden beams, each grafted onto this giant corpse. Weapon observed the full size of the structure from under the bottom of these stairs, set in the very heart of it all. He almost stopped moving just so that he could take in the wonder of it, but Master Cernier began to speak.
"When we reach the dining hall, you are to hide among the beams that cross throughout the ceiling. Wait there, in whatever form will be most hidden to human eyes, until you hear the sound of a gong ring throughout the citadel. You do know what that sounds like, yes?"
Weapon took a second to shift his form into that which could slide quickly up the pathway as he mulled over the question. To his surprise, he found the answer somewhere inside his mind. It certainly wasn't a memory. In fact, it felt far more present than any memory could ever be. The dull tone of a golden gong, the signal of command. It was a natural instinct to Weapon.
"Well, Jin?"
"Of course, sir. As the sound fades, all those residing within the dining hall shall meet their end, their screams drowning in their burst and torn throats." Weapon blinked in surprise. Though he was excited to fulfill a purpose, the elation of the voice was filled with a fervor that brought an unnerving sense throughout Weapon's mind. The sense passed immediately, but it left Weapon with even more questions about the hidden secrets of his mind that shall set him free.
"Good. I don't care how they die. Just make sure it is done quickly and effectively."
They soon reached the top of the pathway, entering into the largest room Weapon had ever seen. Now Weapon was able to sense what he could only observe from underground. The sky was bright, and it showed from an open gap in a wall high above them. It was so much more vast than the tiny rooms that were all Weapon could remember. It even made this room look minuscule, and it just seemed to keep going up and up until it reached the brightest light of all Weapon's existence. It hurt to look upon it with his eyes, so Weapon simply observed it in all its daylight glory.
"The citadel is very nearly complete, but the steel tower walls need reinforcing, especially here in the Great Hall. Perhaps if you are ever awakened by a Cernier after today, you will get to see the true majesty of a fully realized Aurorian fortress."
"Ah, we have arrived." Master Cernier stood before a large set of twin wooden doors, each inscribed with images of incomprehensible figures and objects. At least, they were so for now. Once Weapon learned more, the meaning of everything would become ever clearer.
I will be outside these doors when you are done with this mission. As soon as that occurs, immediately come before me and obey my next command."
Master Sernir smiled at Weapon, and something about it confused him. This was not a cheerful smile, nor one that was full of the anticipation that Weapon had observed before. In fact, Weapon had never observed such an expression in all his existence. It was a soft fear, a wish for something past? No, not quite.
"Now get inside and prepare yourself, Jin. I know you don't need these doors to be opened for you."
With that, Master Sernir walked towards the edge of the open room and near the set of stairs Weapon had observed earlier. They led to a place filled with movement that Weapon found fascinating. There were so many living creatures there. The two guards continued to glance backwards at Weapon as they accompanied their leader, their fear still quite present but petering out, until Weapon couldn't observe them anymore. How strange Master Sernir was. Weapon wondered if having mastery over him would reveal his true thoughts. The faraway concept hummed silently through his mind as he noticed the slight fissure between the bottom of the great wooden door and the dead floor. It would require a very strenuous form, but nothing that Weapon couldn't easily handle. Every part of Weapon's body softened and spread. Within a few seconds, his entire form was almost as ethereal as the very air. He no longer had recognizable apparatuses like other creatures, but his mind remained exactly the same. As he slid into the dining hall, pulling all of himself through the fissure, he thought about how strange this body of his was when comparing it to everyone else. Every creature that he instinctively knew how to kill held their mind in their head. By destroying it in any physical way, the rest of the body would certainly die. But right now, Weapon's head and his body were fully separated, not just from each other, but from every part of themselves too. And yet, Weapon was a physical being. He could move his body and create an effect in the world around him. A formless grin sparked through Weapon's mind. This mystery held yet another secret of his mind that shall set him free. They were all nothing more than questions, but they were exciting questions nonetheless. After fully moving his shapeless body into the dining hall, Weapon recollected himself with a sigh of relief. The strain when separating in that way wasn't painful, but it felt quite unnatural. Whatever his true form was, Weapon knew it couldn't be that. The dining hall was quite similar to what Weapon had observed its shape to be from outside, but the colors that leapt from the windows and transformed the very air were a beautiful surprise to him. They dappled the lengthy wooden tables with both natural and unnatural light, and the shapes inscribed upon the windows themselves were identical to those on the doors, though now they were infused with warm and vibrant life. The sweet-smelling wood pieces of the tables were draped in scarlet cloth, and many fine candlesticks were placed in a pleasing pattern on top of them. Weapon looked towards the beams nearly 40 feet up from the floor that Master Sernir had mentioned, and he began to crawl up the central pillar to reach them, clasping the dead material with long fingers that left no trace behind. When he was close enough to touch the ceiling, he leapt off to the top of a nearby beam, and crawled to the shadowed corners of the dining hall. It was terribly dusty, and several sticky substances that were almost invisible got stuck to Weapon's body. Spiderwebs in the unseen places. So Weapon knew what they were. He smiled and pondered why there were so many of them, and so much dust. He took care not to knock any of it down, as he realized that everywhere else in Master Sernir's fortress had simply been inordinately clean. Dust was natural, and so Master Sernir desired to conquer it, to prove his superiority over natural things in another way. Was that the reason? Maybe he just liked clean places. Weapon thought for a moment. Did Weapon himself like unnatural and clean places more than natural and dusty ones? He couldn't say. As he thought about this while waiting for the sound of the gong, Weapon slowly moved a long finger across the top of a dusty pillar, drawing a picture of the first man Weapon could remember, the one who was hidden and yet seen in the enclosed space. Not much detail could be shown with this small image, and it ended up being nothing more than a rather simplistic pile of shapes, but Weapon felt incredibly pleased. He couldn't explain it, but there was an elation in his very soul that surpassed all other memories. Weapon stared at the drawing in awe, for what must have been more than a few hours, as dust began to cover the image again, and the light passing through the glass began to turn to shades of dim gold. I must focus on the task I was given. The whisper snapped Weapon out of his stupor. Weapon was right. Master Sernir's order was to be followed, and being distracted by some simple thing like a drawing in the dust was pointless. He reluctantly swept over the image, sending it into the past permanently. Why did he feel so sad about that? He didn't care for the man it represented, so why was there such a connection? Before he could mourn it, Weapon realized something was very different in the dining hall. He observed, and he realized that the room had been transformed. Every table had been covered with animal corpses and mutilated plants, each doused in strange chemicals and concoctions, and all of them exuded a smell that filled Weapon's mind with desire. It was a desire to take these corpses into himself, not for any higher purpose, but to satiate the whims of a beast and nature itself. Was it a test? A test set by Master Surnir to see if Weapon would be tempted away from his mission? Weapon steadied himself, focusing on the purposes he was to follow. This test of Master Surnir wouldn't cause Weapon to fail, but if Weapon was ordered to take these things into himself, well, that order would be especially relished. In less than a minute, Weapon observed a large number of people within the room outside, and the doors swung open. Immediately, Weapon shifted into a slightly ethereal and more uncomfortable form, and his mind began to hone in with anticipation. The moment was almost here. There were 50 humans, but Master Surnir wasn't among them. Weapon observed them with great interest. He had never seen individuals with such variety. Some wore the same steel as the guards of the fortress. A few others were clad in elaborate, tinted metal. Many wore nothing but soft material, one that could never defend against the blades Weapon manifested. They would be easy to kill. Weapon began to visualize how he might cut down all of these new people in the fastest way, though most of his focus was on observing them. Oh, they were truly fascinating. A few animals moved alongside them, furry and four-legged, with sharp teeth. These creatures' tongues lolled out of their mouths, and they seemed to be rather stupid. Yet they seemed to have a greater ability to perceive the room than any of the much smarter humans. Even so, they couldn't sense Weapon. He had hidden his form too well for that. Even if they could have sensed him, these people seemed far too busy with their whining conversation.
These theatrics are always so unnecessary.
A large man with black hair all over his face was leaning back in one of the chairs.
It's just a message from the king. Surnir doesn't need to throw a feast every time just to present it.
I'm sure he's just proud of his fortress, Lord Theron. This hall does look rather nice with the stained glass window. That must be one of the brand new additions he told us about. A slender guard admired the lights that streamed down to the table.
Of course it looks nice. Surnir gets a choice pick of the supplies coming from beyond the pass. My sunken joke of a fortress would be twice the spectacle of this if it was the nearest to error.
Weapon didn't quite understand many of these things that they were talking about, but at least he had learned the name of one he was about to kill. Even so, he listened intently. Perhaps one day the memory of this would make sense. Around the room, most of the people were sitting down at the tables, speaking to one another, and letting the tensions within them relax. A guard sat beside the pillar underneath Weapon. A few of the smaller ones were already picking at the corpses on the tables and putting them in their mouths before being stopped by those around them. Weapon smiled. They had failed the test. The one called Lord Theron's voice hushed, and Weapon focused to continue hearing him.
If the king's communication is temporarily quieted like last winter, I'm sure the swords wouldn't notice a little shake-up in this far corner of the Empire.
He subtly nodded toward two other people dressed in similar attire to himself.
Roland and Amire here would agree,
The slender guard nervously glanced around, causing Lord Theron to chortle.
Oh, don't worry yourself. Nothing could hear us in this din.
With that, he leaned back again and spoke loudly once more.
And he's always late to his own feasts. Oh, I don't even know how that's possible. Do you think we should send for someone to wake him up?
Weapon thought for a moment about that comment Lord Theron made about nothing. Was Weapon nothing because he had heard? No, that's silly. He was something inside of nothing back in the underground room. He couldn't be nothing out of nothing. Lord Theron was just unaware of Weapon. As it should be. Still your pointless thoughts, Weapon whispered to himself. Before the conversations could continue, something in the air seemed to freeze in place, and Weapon tensed his whole form. The sound was coming. Prepare yourself, Weapon nodded. The gong's ring pierced through the dining hall. It was just as resounding and invigorating as Weapon had known it would be. All of the visitors looked about in confusion as Weapon reformed himself in midair, taking the shape of a thin, wiry beast with 10 appendages. The guard had leapt to his feet at the sound, and Weapon landed directly on top of him, wrapping all 10 arms around him and piercing their sharp endpoints through the openings in the armor in one swift motion. The guard barely screamed before the heart stopped, and as Weapon retracted the arms, a deep pool of crimson instantly formed underneath. 1 out of 55. Weapon was pleased it was already going so well. It would still take nearly a minute to finish the job. Hopefully that would be enough time to ask a couple of questions. Even as a cacophony of screams and shouts immediately arose around him, Weapon realized that the friendly, high-pitched voice was laughing. It was a bleating and echoing sound, and quite eerie to Weapon. How strange. There wasn't anything distinctly humorous about this. One of the 4-legged beasts lunged at Weapon, snarling with its sharp jaws wide open. 2 of Weapon's thin arms quickly conjoined, and the new spear stabbed the beast through its open jaw, piercing out through the spine. The beast let out a high-pitched whimper, and Weapon found it to be a brand new sound. He realized there were going to be many new discoveries in the next minute, far beyond what his spoken questions would give. How wonderful! As Weapon tossed the beast's corpse to the side, he observed that 31 of the humans were now brandishing their weapons, and there were 3 charging directly at him. Weapon jumped backwards to clutch the pillar and sprang off of it, using the momentum to stab 3 of his arm blades into the guards' faces. As they fell, Weapon reformed his lower body into an imitation of the 4-legged beast, centering his more human-like upper torso in the middle of the spine. As the bodies struck the dead stone, Weapon remained perched upon them, observing the next attackers. Only the people with bulky, metallic clothing were preparing to fight. The ones wearing the soft cloth seemed to realize their vulnerability, and were moving to the other side of the room, near the stained glass windows. They probably wouldn't be able to escape through them. Weapon had observed a fatal height for humans beyond the glass, but it would be sad to see such a beautiful object be destroyed for nothing if they tried. The guards were closer, so they would have to be stopped first. All of them were in a state of fear, some trembling and wary, others flush with adrenaline and attacking. Though most were wielding swords, a few carried spears. All would be easy enough to outmaneuver, and their fear would make them overextend. Each mistake would be their last. Weapon's upper torso formed 4 arms, each the size of a human's, and sharpened the fingers into hardened daggers. His legs bounded from one guard to another, parrying their desperate swings with 2 arms and tearing out the throat with the other 2. 4 more fell within 5 seconds.
Surnir, you grave scum!
Lord Theron had unsheathed a long sword nearly his own height. He raised it above his head, bellowing words laced with rage and passion unlike anything Weapon had ever observed. Not only that, but Weapon observed no fear coming from this man, too. He truly was an equal to Master Surnir. Perhaps he would prove a challenge to overcome.
Soldiers, fight now so we may take our vengeance against this treacherous pig!
Lord Theron's voice alone seemed to be enough to snap many of the guards out of their frightened stupor, and 2 of them flung spears that only missed Weapon's head by a few inches. Before he could retaliate against the unarmed men, 3 more rushed at Weapon, forcing him to retreat up a pillar, clambering with the 4 arms. This was exciting. Weapon had never encountered such a challenge. He would have to use slightly more uncomfortable forms, or else it would take far too long. Oddly enough, the friendly voice had stopped laughing. As another spear was flung towards him, Weapon pushed off of the pillar, tearing himself apart into the shapeless form he had entered the dining hall with. Weapon observed the guards shout with surprise, and he launched himself forward, splitting his uncomfortably shapeless self into several parts. This was one of the most efficient ways of killing, but Weapon felt a strange sensation as he moved towards the 7 closest guards at once. It was like the nothing that had been around Weapon in the first room had suddenly appeared in his mind, eating away at everything. As Weapon poured into the nostrils and mouths of the guards, the gnawing became overwhelming. Weapon had to reform himself into one body as soon as possible. In each guard's throat, Weapon reformed the shapelessness into a desperate wedge of moving spikes, and moved each part of himself towards each other in a burst of energy, tearing through flesh 7 times at once. Relief poured through Weapon's mind as the nothing abated. It was still there for a moment, but as each piece of Weapon coalesced back into a single form on the blood-splattered floor, it faded away entirely. Between the 7 new corpses, Weapon took on a more humanoid form, quickly considering what had just occurred. Perhaps becoming a shapeless being should only be done when backed into a corner. As more guards closed in, Weapon formed small knives along his back. Though part of himself, they were detached into small, separate tools. This was certainly more comfortable than losing his shape, and it would achieve the same purpose. Weapon's body grinned, and the serrated teeth spread across his face. "Quick! Kill it before it turns to smoke again!" A nasally voice sprang from the one Lord Theron called Emire. He commanded others, yet he was shuddering in a corner. How pathetic. Weapon's back rippled forward towards Emire, launching a knife like the guards had thrown their spears. It shrieked through the air, far faster than what it imitated. Emire didn't have time to even look scared before the dagger sunk deep into his forehead, and he slumped, fingers twitching a little, to forever rest on the ground. Yes, that worked very well. Weapon was learning how to kill even better by watching them attack. Should he hold back a little bit, just to see what they would teach him next? Weapon thought about it as he engulfed the length of a spear thrusting at him, broke it apart, and turned the blade back into the guard's face. No, he had to obey Master Cernir's order. They had to die quickly and effectively.
Lord Emire is dead! What sort of monster is this? Don't stop! Press the attack!
Shouts came from all about the room, some without words, others grasping for control in the battle. Weapon heard each one very clearly. He observed their frenzied desire for survival, the bolstering of life. Though he opposed this desire of theirs, it was wonderful to witness. As Weapon spun, letting 5 daggers fly towards fear-contorted faces, he wondered what it felt like to experience such a desire. With every flung dagger, Weapon observed his mass decrease slightly. He would need to reabsorb each one to maintain the force of his strikes, but unlike when he had split into 7 forms, his mind was still fully in one main body. Or was that not entirely true? Weapon silenced another barking beast with a knife through its chest as he observed each dagger buried in a corpse. They were spread so far apart, and yet a response pulsed between all of them, reverberating through his mind. Of course! If he could reform from formlessness, this would be easy. How exciting! With every second of existence, Weapon was learning even more about what he could do. Each scattered dagger began to dissolve into a thick liquid, sliding down the corpses and towards Weapon, but it was taking them too long. 2 beasts had climbed onto the nearby table, and a sharp whistle from the slender guard who had talked with Lord Theron commanded them to pounce for Weapon's throat. His form flowed, turning the 2 arms into a sharp arc that split the creatures, dogs as the guard called out, in half. Though the strike was swift, Weapon was now too small to form a defense at the same time. The effort had left an opening, and Weapon observed the slender guard take full advantage of it behind him. This warrior had drawn 2 swords, both moving in a flowing rhythm alongside a small shield strapped to each arm. With a shout, he brought both blades down on Weapon. Weapon was impressed, but the dagger puddles had given him an idea. As the blades touched the edges of his body, Weapon shifted his form into that of the liquid-like dagger puddles. The look of surprise on the guard's face was invigorating. Weapon laughed within his mind as his fluid form spread across the floor of the dining hall, creating a wide circle that lay under the slender guard, 4 other guards, and Lord Theron. Weapon observed them recoil in terror, but they could not escape him now. The 7 former daggers reached Weapon, and he shifted his form once more, creating 6 spear-like protrusions from the liquid of his body, striking from the floor. Though each guard tried to leap or run away, most were far too slow. 1, 2, 3, 4 times a spear of Weapon's flesh pierced through a guard's leg, emerging between the plates of metal on their shoulder. Only the slender guard evaded the strike, and he leapt with incredible speed toward Lord Theron, pushing him out of the way of the 6th spear. Weapon was intrigued. Such a display of strength and speed was impressive, but it was not nearly enough. The guard was now almost in the path of the spear, and it took Weapon a fragment of a moment to redirect it into a killing blow. The 5 pierced guards hung for a moment from the spears before Weapon reformed himself into his original full-bodied form. As his ears came into existence again, he heard Lord Theron shout in desperate rage.
"Lorcia, no! Why did you? We were to rule this valley together!"
Weapon was amazed. Lord Theron commanded so well that his guards would die to protect him. Would Master Cernir's guards do the same thing? Was it because of that sword Lord Theron was using? Weapon was able to see and observe it up close now that it was only a few feet away, and it was a beautiful thing indeed. It was covered in markings similar to the ones on the door and window, and it seemed to move in Lord Theron's hands with far greater speed than the metal's weight should allow. Weapon would try to remember it well. It seemed that Lord Theron was the last person who was standing against Weapon. Everyone else was cowering or too weak to pose any threat to him. Weapon had succeeded on his mission too well. He would need to ask a question now, or else it might be too late. He pulled his form into a tall figure, one that matched Lord Theron's height, and prepared a flurry of daggers. A wide grin formed on Weapon's face, and the friendly voice spoke. "Answer me, little lord. Do you know what I am?"
"Bah! You're nothing but a Northmount monster that Surnir hides behind!"
Lord Theron lunged forward, knocking away the round of daggers that Weapon threw in reply. Weapon was thrilled. He was a Northmount monster! Whatever that meant, it was very specific, and he was sure it would be more useful in uncovering the secrets of his mind that shall set him free than anything else he had heard so far. He dwelt on those words, pondering them, even as he instinctively jumped back from a vicious swing. At the last moment, he realized his mistake. The beautiful sword was too quick, and it cut deep into Weapon's side. A new voice seemed to scream throughout his body without an audible sound, but it was so loud it called Weapon to cry out with it. His entire side pulsed, reforming away from the chunk of metal, and Weapon retreated back a few feet.
"So, you can be hurt. Good."
Lord Theron grinned. Gleeful determination melded together with rage was radiating from his eyes. Was that soundless voice the herald of his own death? Weapon didn't like it at all. Even after the cut was fixed through the Reformation, it echoed for a few seconds longer. It was better to be uncomfortable than to hear it again. He felt a cold fire burning in his being, a focus to avoid getting struck like that at all costs. Was this the fear that he had observed in those around him? The friendly voice screamed in a fury, spurred by what Weapon felt, and he launched forward, turning into the shapeless form as the sword met his flesh again, letting it pass through completely. The gnawing nothing appeared in his mind even faster than before, but it was too late. Lord Theron cried out in pain for just a moment, as Weapon poured into every opening in his body, no matter how small. A second later, Weapon reformed into a perfect facsimile of Lord Theron, pushing the man's body apart in every direction, leaving nothing remaining. Such a powerful foe! There was no doubt in Weapon's mind. Lord Theron was the greatest creature Weapon had ever observed. He knelt down and picked up the beautiful sword Lord Theron had wielded. Weapon observed it closely. He would remember this as long as he lived, and one day he would know exactly what its strange markings meant. There was no one left who would pose a challenge, just a few people hiding under tables, clutching each other and consumed with terror. The last one, who was dressed in the clothing of a lord, seemed to be already dead. Weapon observed that his heart had forcibly stopped upon feeling such intense fear. Weapon relaxed his form, letting more legs grow from the torso as he skittered to the nearest group, 3 smaller humans and 1 normal-sized. Now that all danger was gone, he could ask them anything about himself. If Lord Theron provided so much already, these ones might even give everything. He lifted the table, causing the blood-marred objects on top to scatter to the ground, and he encircled the 4 humans with a stretched form to ensure they couldn't run away. 2 of them screamed with a shrill pitch, and Weapon formed a hopefully friendly smile. Now to find out what they knew about him. "Hello there, children," the friendly voice bounced. "Before I put an end to that short life of yours, what do I remind you of? Have you ever seen something as wonderful as me before?" Weapon eagerly awaited a response, but he heard nothing but crying and whimpering pleas for help. Only fear could be observed. No knowledge, no tidbits of realization. Weapon was very disappointed. After 10 seconds, he extinguished their movement and sound with 4 sharpened appendages and moved on to the last living people in the dining hall without a word. Each one was effectively the same. All were utterly consumed with fear and didn't answer a single question. Some tried to scramble away, others covered the ones they were with, and a couple offered him something called mercy, begging him to have it over and over. Weapon had no knowledge of such an object, though he must not have wanted it, as the bouncy voice told them. "My apologies, but your families would be so lonely in death without you there, and we can't have naughty heirs causing my master trouble down the line. You understand, yes?" Weapon didn't understand at all, but the friendly voice seemed happy as he ripped them apart. Why was it so pleased by this? It was strange. Weapon slowly realized a truth as he approached the final group of living people. A fear-filled person couldn't teach Weapon about himself. The less fear someone had, like Lord Theron, the more Weapon could learn. But the fearless ones were either trying to kill Weapon, or they commanded him. Perhaps one day he would meet someone who wasn't the target of a mission and wasn't afraid of Weapon. A friend of Weapon. He could talk and talk to the friend, and he would quickly learn the secrets of his mind that shall set him free. That sounded nice. A smile floated through Weapon's mind at the thought. As he observed the last pulse fading away, Weapon felt satisfied. His purpose had been fulfilled, and the mission was a success. On top of that, he had learned so many new things during it. This should be the happiest he had ever been, and yet he realized he wasn't as content as when he had drawn the image while in the dusty beams. Why was that the case? There was nothing special about it, and it had been easy to do, especially when compared to Master Cernier's mission. It itched in Weapon's mind, but before Weapon could think about it any more, the great doors began to open of their own accord. Through observation, Weapon knew who stood there well before he saw him. A boasting welcome was in order. He quickly morphed his body into the first form he had taken in the underground room, hopped gracefully on top of a table, and bowed. "Welcome, Master Cernier, to a masterfully executed massacre. I'm sure you are quite proud of your purchase, and I hope you shall be a coward once again in the future so that I may continue to serve." Master Cernier was standing alongside the guards from earlier, and Weapon observed the contents of their two stomachs churn and rise. They looked away, shaking, as Master Cernier continued to stare at the dozens of corpses. The strange feeling Weapon had sensed in him earlier had doubled in intensity, and he didn't say a word for nearly 10 seconds. When he finally spoke, it was with a much quieter voice than the commanding tone Weapon remembered.
"Well done, Jin. Everything has been set in order. Just as I planned."
Weapon focused on Master Cernier. This strange mood of his would surely be understood, as soon as Weapon learned more about the world. One of the guards spoke for the first time since Weapon had awakened.
How could this be the answer, Lord Cernier? This is what you wanted."
The bouncy voice chuckled. "Yes, and he was laughing with every little child I tore apart. How simply barbaric your lord is." Weapon was confused. Well now, that was just a lie. Master Cernier was acting strange, but he was clearly upset, and not at Weapon. Was the voice simply jabbing at him with words? Master Cernier glared at Weapon, a dying rage smoldering in his eyes.
"Cease your tongue, Jin."
He faced the two guards. One had collapsed, still trembling, onto the floor.
"Brothers, speak not a word of this to anyone without my say."
How odd. Weapon knew brothers were a relation of blood, yet these three shared nothing of the sort with each other. Why did Master Cernier call them so? Unfortunately, he had also commanded Weapon's tongue to cease, so he couldn't ask. Turning away to the door, Master Cernier commanded Weapon again.
"Jin, follow me. We cannot linger here."
As they stepped into the large hall, the doors closed on their own power again. How did it do so? Weapon had observed that the tower was dead, but was he wrong? Master Cernier cleared his throat.
"Aethel, it is finished."
Another person, dressed in a flowing outfit, appeared from the top of the stairwell. His feet clicked against the stone in a sharp, singular rhythm, and he held a small and sleeping and very different version of himself. As he looked at Weapon, he gasped, turning to Master Cernier with a cold, shocked stare. "So, you actually went through with it." How fascinating they were! Weapon wanted to talk to this Aethel, to ask him why Weapon observed curiosity, revulsion, and devotion in equal parts flowing from his mind. Master Cernier's command of silence was so hard to keep.
"I had to. The Empire of Error is no more, Aethel. Chaos will reign throughout the world, and it would have done so here as well. My actions have made the Cernier clan the last Genranite family in all the valley. So tell Sieur Figuaro to send word to those at Traveler's Pass to return to the Citadel. I will ensure peace for our people."
"Right away, my lord." Aethel took one last glance at the doors of the dining hall and began walking away towards the outside. It was quite strange. Though Master Cernier had been facing Aethel, the last sentence seemed to be directed to someone else, desperate to prove himself not a liar. Was he talking to himself? Before Weapon could ask, Master Cernier pointed at him.
"I believe that is all I requested of you, Jin. You are released of all temporary commands, but this. Go to sleep until you hear the command of Cernier once more."
The entire world began to fade away. The nothing was closing in on all sides. However, it wasn't worrying like when Weapon was in the uncomfortable form. No, it was a calm, boring nothing, like when he had first fallen asleep. His observation faltered once more, and before it disappeared completely, Weapon's mouth opened. "And all I wanted was to be wished a good morning like you promised. How very rude of you indeed, master." It was the bouncy voice who spoke, but Weapon agreed with every word. And so, those 2 instances remained as all that Weapon had to remember. Only the calm voice with its constant order was present with him in the emptiness, repeating over and over, "Find the hidden secrets of your mind that shall set you free." How long had it been since that last mission had ended? Had it been 30 minutes, or 20 seconds? Or perhaps it had been 100 years? Weapon had no idea. Regardless, Weapon needed to follow the calm voice's order. He needed to know what all the markings in the fortress and on the sword meant, what a Northmount monster was, why that drawing had meant so much to him, and what were the hidden secrets of his mind that shall set him free. The next mission, and all its discoveries, would certainly come soon. The thought of it sent a smile screaming across his mind. All that was left to do was wait. Wait, with the voice that was certainly becoming quite annoying. "Find the hidden secrets of your mind that shall set you free."